Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to EF's new office in San Francisco. I hope that we can squeeze you in. There are plenty of chairs. Well, not plenty. If you run, there are some chairs on this side of the stage. If you would like to sit down for the next couple of hours, I would encourage you to head to this side of the room. I'm Alice. I'm CEO and co-founder of EF. And to kick off, I'm joined by a man who needs no introduction, Vinod Khosla. We asked Vinod to come and speak because we've now done 9 co-investments with Khosla Ventures. I really see Vinod, as one of the best founders and investors not just in the Bay Area, in the world. And Vinod very kindly agreed to come and speak and to talk for the next 20 minutes or so about some of his learnings in venture capital and some of his views on AI dystopia or utopia. So we were actually just chatting beforehand. And I was saying how quickly the founders were getting offers post-demo day and how crazy the market seems right now. And you sort of paused and stopped and say, speed, is that necessarily what founders should be optimizing for?
I said that's a bad idea.
You said it was a bad idea. Tell us, how do you think about how founders should select investors and where speed might fit in that stack rank?
So from my point of view, just because somebody's rushing to give you money doesn't mean you want to take it. In fact, it's counterindicative. If they haven't asked you hard questions to make you think about your startup, maybe even change some parts of your strategy or evolve it, they're not going to be the long-term partner you need. To all the investors here, I'd say the same thing. Focus on what you can add to a company, not money. So whether it's seed or A investing, it's not about the money. You're getting a partner you can't fire. It's the only employee you get who you can't fire for a long time. And so you want to get the most out of an investor. And if they aren't making you think hard about your business, ask questions that make you maybe change your strategy, maybe squirm a little bit. Those are the questions you want. The sooner you discover the hard questions in your startup area, the better you will be to address them. And that's what you want, not the first investor to give a check. Because if people aren't thoughtful and just want to throw money at what they think might be hot, they are definitely the wrong partner for you.
Yeah. So let's go back.
I know it sounds counterintuitive, but it's obvious once I say it this way.
Well, I mean, we're very lucky at EF that the founders that you see today, we've known some of them for years, and we've worked with all of them day in, day out in the same office. We've got a co-working space upstairs, day in, day out for the last 6 months. So, I mean, in many ways, we're the slowest investors in the world because we get to spend so much time with these founders before we actually put capital behind them. Let's talk about, so EF, when we first start working with someone, we start working them at the point where they're considering founding a company. It's pre-company, pre-team, sometimes even pre-idea. And so really what we're looking for are founder behaviors. You've seen so many of the world's best founders over a long period of time. What are the founder behaviors that you think are most important? How do you identify them at the very early stage, and what are they?
So before I answer that question, let me ask this audience a question. What do you think I look for the most in a situation like this, where a founder is working with you for 6 months or whatever? What do you think is the single biggest question for me on the founder? Anybody hazard a guess? It's not how much expertise they have, what their degrees are, not even the market they're going after. So what do you think it is? How many times have you disagreed? The question I ask is of the partner at the EF or whoever's incubating a thing, how much have they changed during that incubation period? How much have they evolved their thinking? Because no founder gets their plans right. Occasionally they get lucky, but 95% of the time, they never get their plans right. So if somebody's evolving their strategy and learning quickly and running the experiments to get better very quickly in what they're trying to do, it's the single biggest incubator, whether it's EF or YC. I ask the partner involved, how much have they changed? How much have they evolved during this short period? And you can tell in 3 or 6 months how good a founder will be at continuing to evolve their plan and go after the right opportunities.
I love this. So as you may know, we build co-founding teams from scratch, and we train our team to try and understand which teams are flying, which should maybe try and find different co-founders. And
by the way, this is the exact complementary thing of who rushes you a term sheet. It's who asks the questions that make your business plan better.
Yeah.
Or find its vulnerabilities before the market finds them.
Yeah, and so we find the teams that should stay together are the ones that every time you meet them, they tell you something surprising and new because their learning speed is just so fast. Seed is getting quite crazy right now. I suppose one of the other shifts that we're seeing is that founders are getting more and more excited about the idea of how much revenue can you produce on the smallest possible number of employees. What does this mean for seed investors? How should seed investors think about the market shifting as it becomes easier and cheaper than ever to build a startup and very quickly get to revenue?
Yeah, that's another bad metric to use. So I use metrics that are exactly the opposite. It's what have you done to test your market? To the extent it is discovering something about the market by getting customer traction, that's important. And that's part of iterating what your product is. It's not revenue, it's how are people perceiving the product. But even more important, I always tell good founders starts with today saying in 2030, and those of you who worked with me, that's the first question I ask. What do you want to be in 2030? And if you don't have a clear idea, you don't know what you're steering towards. And every turn or twist you make will be short term. It'll be optimizing for what's next, not where you're trying to go. Once you decide where you're trying to go by 2030, you can then decide to do optimizations of all sorts. And give you my favorite analogy for founders. Be obstinate about your vision, which is, hey, I want to climb Mount Everest, this particular hill. Be really flexible about your tactics as the world evolves. But that does not mean you chase the most revenue. And the way I explain it, if you're going to Mount Everest, nobody ever got to the top of Mount Everest before getting to base camp first. And then Camp 1, and then Camp 2, Camp 3, Camp 4, and then the ascent to the peak. And none of it is in a straight line. You can get to a higher elevation than base camp without getting to base camp, and that's like chasing revenue so you can get to someplace. But if that someplace doesn't build assets for getting to the right target, the Mount Everest, the peak you've defined, it's not going to help you. And people get stuck in those segments. And if it takes building certain assets before you even start getting revenue, then that's a better strategy than ARR. So one has to be really thoughtful about how to get where one's going, how to get there, what's the easiest path, what is base camp and all the camps along the way, not what's the highest revenue, which may be a higher peak in the neighborhood of base camp. And suddenly, you're stuck up there on a lonely peak in an isolated island, and suddenly that revenue doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So be very, very thoughtful. And that's the other thing. Don't chase what investors, as entrepreneurs, don't chase what investors tell you to chase, because they have lots of companies to invest in. You have one bet as an entrepreneur. And you have to be much more thoughtful. You can't spray and pray.
Let's go back to this idea of where will you be by 2030, but for the investors in the room, you've said that AI will be able to do 80% of the work of 80% of the jobs. What does that mean if you're an early stage VC? Should you be leaning into AI and automating parts of your workflow? Or is this where taste and craft suddenly becomes even more important? How do you think about that?
How many saw a press release or press article by Anthropic yesterday that said by next year there will be AI worker or something like that, right? How many saw that piece? So what AI is capable of in the near term is much more than most of you expect, maybe all of you expect. How to get it deployed is a much harder question. So capability will be there much faster than we imagine. And I think, I originally used to say 2030. I think I was way too conservative. I think in the next 2 or 3 years, AI will be capable of every single job humans do, and most of it. Now, some things have regulatory constraints in AI interventional medicine doing cardiac surgery. The FDA won't let that happen, so there's regulatory and other constraints in certain markets. But the capability to develop any capability that humans are capable of doing will be there by the end of next year. That's pretty soon. So your opportunity is then to say, what do we back to deploy it? And we have two worlds that are going to collide. The world of AI capability that Anthropic was talking about, Sam says the same thing. I've talked to Larry Page a week and a half ago. Same thing, like nobody understands where this is going. It's so radical. How many have read the paper, Situational Awareness? A few hands. Everybody should read it. So there's this world where the capability to do almost anything is now possible. And I think somebody in the next 2 years will start a company, a startup, which with 10 employees will reach $1 billion in revenue. That will happen very soon. Who does it when? I don't have a target in mind, so I'm looking. But that's an ambitious target. 10 employees, $1 billion in revenue, the math just almost always works. So there's this world of AI is accelerating, and the reason it's accelerating, and let me try and explain that too. We've had a lot of progress. We invested in OpenAI in 2018, long before this was a word, and people were hung up on, is it a for-profit, non-profit, what's the product? I said, doesn't matter, AI will be big enough where if it works, it's going to be huge, and you won't care about timeline, when it happens, how it happens, it'll be big enough. That thesis has proven correct. The ChatGPT was released in December of 22, so just over 2 years ago. It's only 2 years ago. And we will see more progress by the end of next year than we saw in the last 2 years. Much more progress. For the following reason. Most of the scientists developing AI will be AI scientists. So AI scientists coming up with new hypotheses on how to do X or Y. And then testing it. So suddenly OpenAI may have 10 times or 100 times the number of scientists that they have today. And that means an acceleration. Google will do the same thing, and Anthropic will do the same thing. So that's why the rate of progress will accelerate. And then on the other side, you take corporate America, and I believe they're mostly rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. So they're saying, how do I optimize efficiency on this function with some AI thing, and very proud of what they can report to their board about how they're using AI. And that's happening in every boardroom. Every board meeting, there's talk on, these are big corporations, on how we are using AI. So there's these two worlds that are going to collide. One's about deployment, the one's about others about capability. How this intersection happens, I don't think me or anybody else can predict. It'll be very chaotic, but we're due for massive change. My bet is by 2030, there'll be half a dozen companies that are just starting or started that'll be worth $100 billion. That's the size of the opportunity. Clearly, the best software engineer startup will be worth $100 billion. Whether it's Cognition or Cursor or somebody else or Replit or something, Hard to tell. In fact, very likely there'll be more than one. I could go down the line of other areas where you could create $100 billion companies, but we probably don't have enough time today.
Well, I suppose, what's the market that you think is underrated or undervalued at the moment?
I think as much excitement as there is about robotics is grossly undervalued. So how many saw a talk I gave at TED last year, and there's a video of it called Plausible Tomorrows? Only a few hands. I have a dozen predictions of how radically different the planet will be in 20 years or so. Radically different. I believe we can eliminate most cars in most cities. And there's not a person who's argued why that's not possible. Now, if that's true, then the auto industry is toast, not only because of electric cars, which they aren't moving very fast on. The Chinese are. Elon is, but he's distracted. The Chinese BYD completely beating everybody's, I won't use an impolite word, ass, in Europe right now and most of the world. They have 2-year, 18-month to 2-year design cycles for the European car manufacturers. The American ones have 5 to 7-year design cycles. So the auto industry may be in trouble. But the bigger opportunity, I believe, the bipedal robot industry by 2040, it's only 15 years. Startups do struggle for 5, 7 years and then accelerate, will be larger than the auto industry is today. That's a radical assumption. Nobody believes me. So you can look at any of the 13 or 12, 13 predictions I've made in this video called Plausible Tomorrows. Each one is a $1 trillion opportunity. And so one of my forecasts is all expertise will be free. And I do a lot of talking to healthcare boards now and say, if by 2030 you could cut, and it's an industry that survives on razor-thin margins because nobody has any advantage. And I say, if all expertise is free, you have free oncologists and free primary care doctors and free, in oncology, we're doing a startup with an EF startup called Radical. All of this expertise, primary care doctors, mental health therapists, oncologists, structural engineers, accountants, chip designers, they will all be free expertise. So what I talked about in a situation like AI scientists doing AI development of models, will happen in every area, just a little bit slower. But we are working in all those areas. If any of you have things you're doing in that area, whether it's a material science researcher or a scientist in biology or medicine, we are doing every skill. And I think that will happen very, very quickly. And then the question will be, from a business model, how to apply it. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about the deployment of these technologies, how you accelerate deployment, because the traditional infrastructure is going to be very slow. The American Medical Association, which is a union, will not let AI do anything because it takes away their fees. They get paid for a primary care visit. If you could do it with an AI, why would they let you do it? And they get to control what is medical advice and what isn't. So lots of obstacles in the way. There's a half a dozen reasons why this may not happen. But I look on I'm an optimist. I look on the number of opportunities we have for entrepreneurs and investors. It's pretty exciting. I get excited like I was 16.
Well, and you've written this great piece about AI dystopia or utopia. And I think a nice kind of piece for us to end on is you have a vision for this kind of world of abundance that is going to be created by AI. What is that going to look like? Why does it make you excited like a 16-year-old?
So my general thesis is the following. The next 5 years, between now and 2030, it will look, so in 2016, I wrote a long blog. This was 2016, so before sort of OpenAI. It was called AI Will Cause Great Abundance, great productivity growth, great GDP growth, everything economists love, and increasing income disparity was the tagline. I truly believe that. In the next 5 years will look like the first part of this cycle that I defined in 2016. It'll be like productivity improvements in every corporation. They can do more with fewer employees, and so it looks like productivity gains in industry. It'll start slowly, it'll accelerate. The 2030s will be massive disruption as politics starts to play a larger and larger role in terms of employment displacement. By then, it'll be clear every single job can be replaced. Maybe there's exceptions like heart surgery, like I mentioned before, a certain interventional medicine. There'll be a few, but mostly, and I think 80% of jobs was a too conservative estimate. I'll take that back now. I'll say 90% of jobs, or 95% of 95% of jobs. That's massive societal dislocation. If most of the jobs in this country have to be replaced with something, I don't know how society reacts, how politics reacts. Democracy is by permission of, capitalism is by permission of democracy, and democracy reacts to personal local interests, as we've seen. So it's going to be very chaotic in the 2030s. I can't predict exactly how this will play out. It'll vary dramatically by country, dramatically by industry. You know, if you have a BPO business, you cut out the BPO, and you don't care whether the employee is in the Philippines or India, right? But if it's local employees that vote and go on strike, and we saw that with the Screen Actors Guild, we'll see that kind of phenomena. So 2030s will be very chaotic with so much dislocation. By the way, while GDP growth is accelerating, I do believe we'll get to much, much higher GDP growth than we are seeing today, because you'll produce more goods and services faster, which is what GDP is, but with no labor. And so my bet is it'll be a hugely deflationary economy in the 2030s. At the macroeconomic level, lots of employment. Maybe by 2040, $10,000 buys more than $100,000 buys today. That's pretty disruptive. So people always say, where will people get money? We will have enough abundance. And then in the 2040s, going towards 2050, I think we will have more than enough, and people will have settled down where there's all the basic needs are taken care of. Taxes will be higher, but nobody will care.
Sounds like a good note to end on. Vinod, I'm loath to stop this, but we need to get on with the pitches. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, everybody.